I got into strength conditioning from a mentor of mine back at Rochester, New York. And I took 2 classes with him, and they were sport performance coaching and exercise science. And I fell in love with kind of human performance. I realized quickly that I did not want to do personal training, and I wanted to move more towards that team element. So I looked at grad schools, and I ended up at Springfield College, and I did 2 years there, and I was lucky enough to get a graduate assistant position for my second year while I was there. So I worked with men's volleyball and men's lacrosse, and also lucky enough to win a national championship with men's volleyball. So my experience there was invaluable. The situation at LVC was unique because we didn't have a strength conditioning coach prior to myself. So that was one of the biggest appealing things for me, is that I could come in here, put my stamp on it. And as I've been interning, as I've been going through this field for so long, I've always tried to create my own philosophy. My whole philosophy and background on the way that I program has come from a bunch of different areas. It's come from all the coaches that I've been with. And then a lot of the programming is structured around what I have and what I don't have. And with the facility here, there's some limitations in my programming. So I can't program everyone in a rack at the same time, back squatting, or even pairing certain exercises together. In an ideal situation, I'd have that. But just with the facility that we have here, we don't have the luxury of just bringing in 50 people or 80 people on a football team, 90 people, and saying start at the beginning of this weightlifting card and then end at the end. So there's some programming changes on that end. Where I start with everyone's programming is essentially coming in, creating a good foundation for movement. So we start with movement, and everyone so far has gone through really a week session of where we just work on movement quality, because these kids have never had a formal strength conditioning coach, and there's no program. So you can't just step in there and assume that kids understand the structure. They have no culture of strength conditioning either. So there's this whole combination of building the culture, having a good program, not going over their heads with the material, and making it fun and engaging it still, while I try to get them better. One of my biggest things that I'd like to follow is that you have to have athlete education. Athlete education is key to getting the buy-in, and getting the buy-in is key to being successful. So going back to not just lifting as heavy as possible all the time, there's way more science involved in strength and conditioning today versus years past. So now you don't just have someone writing down a program and saying, hey, this looks good, like on paper. You're actually going through a system that tells you, okay, so this makes sense with this exercise because of this joint angle, this range of motion, and this makes sense with this because we just did this exercise previously. So there's more science to it. I try to track the majority of the teams here with a spreadsheet, and they take a daily questionnaire, and it lets me know just a couple things prior to them stepping into the weight room, or to look at their overall workload for previous weeks or over a full season, or from this season compared to last season as we progress here. And it's just 7 questions, and they tell me if they had good sleep, if they're stressed, what type of mood they're in, things like that. So that me being one coach, and I have 50 athletes in the weight room, and every single day when they come in, I have one athlete that just slips through the cracks, even though that person might be really struggling in a lot of areas. So they might have poor grades, or exams are coming up, they didn't get any sleep, they broke up with their girlfriend. All these things are weighing on them, and then I go expect them to test out in a 1 repetition max of a back squat or something. and then he gets a really low number, or he gets hurt, and then you question, well, what's going on with that? And it's like, well, I could have done something to catch this prior to it happening, and maybe backed off in some areas, whether it be practice load or in the weight room loads, so that we didn't get this result. So I think we're in a unique situation here at LVC with the coaches and the trust that they've given me as a strength and conditioning coach. I think usually the trust that I'm getting now is a 2, 3, 4 year down the road type of deal. So I'm just blessed and lucky to have that situation. Maybe I've done a good job so far where I got that buy-in early from them, but the coaches have been great with giving me kind of full reign over what I think is best for them, regardless of where they are in season. So what I tell them up front is that, like the athletes, I want to make your athletes the best they can be in their sport. So anything I do in the weight room should only enhance their ability to play sport. I should not be taking anything away from them. So as long as we stay in good communication, you let me know what you're doing on the court or on the field or in the pool, and I'll adjust compared to what you're doing for practices. So a quote that I learned in grad school was that athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They want to know that you're invested in them on a personal level to get them better, and then that's when the true buy-in starts to happen. And that's when these kids will do anything you say, and they know that it's going to benefit them. And that's where I want every athlete here to be. But we have a unique situation here where we house the students, the community members, and the athletes. So everyone uses that fitness facility. And that's really what it is right now. It's a fitness facility. It's not really a weight room designed around athletes. And that's kind of where the direction of the program is going to start to head, is to more athlete-centric environment. So where the weight room is heading is in a direction that would be able to house that. So maybe we would have a smaller team like a basketball in there with a lacrosse team. Or we had tennis and a golf, or one of those smaller teams in there, so that we can get both of them in at the same time, and we leave a whole nother hour of training available to 1 or 2 other teams. So the first thing was just to reorganize the weight room. So phase 1 was reorganizing the weight room, and that opened up a huge area of floor space in the middle of the weight room. And phase 2 is essentially we took out some of the machines. We have a bunch of older Nautilus machines. We took some of those out so that we could make room for what was coming in. So we had more Swiss balls come in. We had foam rollers, med balls, weights. We had way more things come in that needed room. So, and all those things had storage. So the Swiss balls have storage, the foam rollers have storage, the weights have storage. So there was a lot of things that needed to be kind of put into a certain spot in the weight room and stay there, which also took up some extra room. But before, it was just chaotic with things placed everywhere and you couldn't find what you needed. Now phase 3 is really, we're trying to work towards accommodating more athletes. So previously, the phase 1 and phase 2 was really just to make sure it's a safer environment for the athletes to come in there, and also be able to program on more of this science level versus we're just going to get in there and bench press and do things like that. And I would say our phase 4 would be our next biggest step, and that is where the weight room really would become a fully student populated weight room. And that would be the 10 racks, that would be 6 glute ham raises, that would be 8 benches. We'd have a bunch of Aerodyne bikes so that we could do conditioning. We would have just pretty much everything that you need in a nice, systematically laid out fashion that could truly take 2 or 3 teams at once. Program-wise, the goals there is really just to implement what I have going now and can just continue to grow on that. So all these teams will just slowly be progressed. And while right now they're going from regressions to progressions within their lifts, that will also just continue overall through their years that they're here. So that the upperclassmen will be able to kind of have a trickle-down effect on the freshmen coming in. That's where I want these athletes to eventually be by the time they're in their fourth year, is to understand the positions, know what is expected, and when we get new exercises and things like that, they have a general idea of what type of setup they need to be in already. Because I teach movements and certain setups, so I say, hey, let's get hinge position, and there's 5 or 6 things they need to do within that position that are already locked in. I'll sit there and I'll watch the warm-ups pre-game, and I'll watch the game, and I look at that athlete that I trained, and I say, could I do anything more for that athlete in the weight room? Yeah. Did I do everything possible to get them the best that they could be, the furthest away from possible injury, the closest to being the highest performance? Did I do any disservice to them based on what we did in the weight room?